Mrs. McLean?
Here.
Ms. Seward?
Here.
Mrs. De Silva?
Here.
And Mrs. Messick?
Here.
Mr. Valentine is ill this evening.
Dr. Schwanke, if you would lead us in the pledge. It is recommended to approve the April 13th, 2026 regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. McLean. Please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. McLean?
Yes.
Ms. Seward?
Yes.
And Mrs. Messick?
Yes. Agenda passes 4-0. It is recommended to approve the agenda for tonight as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Seward. Please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Ms. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. McLean?
Yes.
And Mrs. Messick?
Yes. Agenda approved 4-0. Moving on to public content and public participation. First up is Paru Patel.
There you go. Sorry. I'm here today as a parent of a Jerome freshman and an Eversole Run 7th grader. I am deeply concerned with the proposed redistricting that would move our homes in northern Muirfield and Tartan to Scioto High School. This decision appears to be arbitrary and unsupported by clear reasoning as to why our neighborhood should be reassigned, especially considering how the previous redistricting process was. I also disagree with the shorter timeline, as it feels like a promise broken to do a better job this time, considering how divisive the previous process was. For as long as I've been a resident of Tartan, it has primarily fed two ways: Penny to Griselle to Jerome, or Penny to Eversole to Jerome. This stability has been a reason why the area has grown and creates a safe space for our youth to thrive. To date, there has been no compelling justification as to why our communities, long aligned socially, geographically, and historically with our current schools, should be redistricted to Scioto. Beyond the already documented concerns from the community and the Shawnee Hills Police Chief regarding unsafe travel routes and increased traffic congestion, this would fundamentally disrupt our children's sense of community. The Glick Bridge will not be able to handle the increased traffic, and the high speeds of Riverside Drive are challenging even for the most experienced drivers. Putting our young teen drivers on this route with normal traffic, construction vehicles, and buses creates an unsafe situation for all. I would also note the fact that the district has already ruled out that Shawnee Hills could take more traffic per Mayor Matthews. This proposed redistricting undermines those values and disrupts families who have been long aligned and supported these communities. I urge the district to reconsider this proposal and pursue solutions that are equitable, transparent, and respectful of the established neighborhoods and communities. Thank you.
Tracy Borquin.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Berkwin. You asked for community input, and the community answered clearly in both professional surveys. Planning Next found that 81% want the district to plan now for future growth, and for proximity, 2 of the 4 choices, or 64%, had feedback specifically emphasizing that biking and walking to school and activities are critical. The Fallon survey confirmed the same priorities. First, plan now so redistricting lasts. Second, prioritize proximity, especially biking to school and activities. Third, impact the fewest number of students by moving growth areas, a point supported by 72% of Union County itself. There was no ambiguity. Proximity means students who can bike or walk to school or extracurriculars should not be sacrificed to make things slightly more convenient for those who live farther away. The district has made clear how much it values extracurriculars through funding and by emphasizing the importance of being D1, a term used for sports. Convenience for distant students should not be at the expense of bikers. That's not what the surveys said, and it's unjust. It's worth noting that moving neighborhoods like Bristol Commons and Bailey contradicts all 3 priorities. First, it does nothing to address future growth because our area is not growing. Second, it ignores proximity. Our students bike to practices, games, and activities, especially in the summer. Of the areas considered, we are among the closest neighborhoods to Kaufman and Jerome. Moving us would more than double that distance and turn a safe, flat route into one that is long, hilly, and dangerous. Third, it does not minimize impact. Moving Kaufman students to Scioto to make room for Jerome students does not reduce disruption. It doubles it. That's not opinion. That's just math. Despite this clarity, the 3rd survey introduces confusion. Many families didn't understand the domino effect meant moving Kaufman students out so Jerome students could have their spots. Once they did, neighborhoods scrambled to rally the troops. That's not meaningful input. That's a popularity contest. And it contradicts what the 2 professional surveys already told you. Keep students close and move the fewest by addressing where the growth actually is. These priorities are not in conflict. They align and are completely possible if you actually move where the growth is, since the growth is not in the center of the district near the high schools. Shifting students away from nearby schools to accommodate those farther away creates inefficiencies. It forces families to pass a closer school to attend a more distant one, while rewarding those who intentionally chose to live farther away. If Jerome Village growth is not addressed, it will continue unchecked in an area historically completely unwilling to vote to fund schools. As growth there overshadows Franklin County, passing a levy will be impossible. Meanwhile, other families will constantly be dragged from school to school to make space for them. You have 2 clear, professional, consistent surveys you committed to following. Please honor them and make a decision that is fair, logical, and sustainable for the entire district. Thank you.
Amanda White.
This process was put on pause in the fall because of the lack of transparency and the backdoor rumblings of secret deals. Here we stand before you as DCS attempts to dictate a facade of transparency to achieve the same political outcomes that was pushed so hard in the subtext of everything in the fall. The backdoor deals seem to remain the same, and Dr. Marshausen openly stated that he only speaks to Planning Next on the phone, so we must assume are future map makers as well. So the community cannot request the context of those conversations through public records requests. How is that transparency? What we, the community, have established through the focus groups and survey criteria is that proximity means bikeable in non-transport zones. Families that live 4 minutes away from their current high school should not be moved to keep the furthest away areas comfortable in their uncontrolled growth. There are plenty of areas in DCS to redistrict it without destroying the communities built from living so close to high school. These community survey responses matter. The same focus groups and surveys established that DCS should move the growth directly to Scioto, where the space is. The growth is in Jerome Village. Move Jerome Village. This is not only what your community has asked you to do, It is literally the only solution where DCS isn't doing high school spot redistricting in 2 to 3 years, affecting the same family and children over and over. DCS asked Bright Elementary students to drive 16 to 20 minutes to Scioto. Why can't we ask the same for DEP students? From DEP to Jerome is already a 10 to 12-minute drive. What's the difference does 4 more minutes make? When writing the criteria for the map, I beg the entire board to be present. We elected 5 equal board members. We did not choose who would sit as president and vice president. Write the criteria here in the open forum so that your transparency promises can be more of a reality than a facade. Board members, we are here redistricting because of the overcrowding at Jerome High School. If the map is drawn that does not properly fix that principle, vote it down. Oh, and I'm still waiting for my simple public records request. It's been over 4 weeks. That doesn't seem reasonable or transparent.
Catherine Yazzer.
During school board meetings, I always like to see the board celebrate outstanding students. It was wonderful to see the Scioto and Jerome cheer teams recognized recently, as well as the Kaufman Rustlers. These student athletes worked tirelessly for their achievements and spent countless hours training at their respective schools. My question to all of you is, if the commute to and from school for all of those practices was not safe or practical, would those athletes still be that successful? Would forcing students and families from the northern part of the district to repeatedly travel back and forth on dangerous roads create an environment for success athletically or academically? In a letter that the board received back in March, the Shawnee Hills Chief of Police speaks to this. He said, in today's environment, transportation safety is not a secondary consideration. It is a primary expectation of the community. Decisions that knowingly place students in higher risk travel conditions will not go unnoticed, particularly when those risks result in preventable incidents. The mayor of Shawnee Hills also rejects the idea of forcing traffic across Glick Bridge. He has stated that he is happy to host any board members that would like to see the traffic themselves. As if to prove their point, there was an accident on the evening of April 13th that closed Glick Bridge. If this date sounds familiar, it actually happened during the last school board meeting. Look, these community leaders have only one goal, to keep their residents safe. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the same of our school board members. Complicating the traffic in this area even more is a water plant that is being constructed on Home and Dublin roads. That project will not be completed until 2033, according to the Columbus Water's website. Not only does this bring even more traffic to Riverside, the website also states that, quote, school districts west of the Scioto River should anticipate temporary inconveniences to their facilities and along bus routes. There will be detours, flaggers, and lane closures in the northwest area of the district for years. If the board does decide to move forward with the map that redistricts northern neighborhoods to Scioto, I would like to request an objective reason. Why would Glick Bridge be chosen over Emerald Bridge as an access point? Other areas of the district have much safer routes to Scioto and are closer geographically. Furthermore, several key redistricting guidelines listed on the board's website would also need to be ignored, i.e. safe and efficient transportation and proximity and ease of access. If this board decides to present a map sending northern neighborhoods to Scioto, I request that a written response be posted to the website to explain their reasoning. Some of you have previously asked why communities in the northern area weren't included in the original redistricting proposals. One word, safety. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were already spent to study this. Not one time were the northern communities considered for redistricting. Why? Safety. I truly hope that you do not choose to ignore the words of experts, the inarguable data, and the very valid concerns of the families whom you were elected to serve. Thank you for your time.
Nate Filler.
Before you start that timer, there were 2 working moms that came in at 6:02 and 6:03 that were told they couldn't speak. And we have great Boy Scouts here. I don't think that's appropriate at all, because nowhere in Cassie's email did it say you had to be here at 6. Thank you. My name is Nate Filler, and I speak from the heart tonight. I'm uniquely positioned to provide a common sense perspective on redistricting as someone who's literally lived on both sides of the river. First as a student off Sawmill Road, and now living in Muirfield Village for the past decade as a parent of a Jerome freshman and 2 Jerome grads. Growing up an old Sawmill kid, I was in the first class that actually opened Davis Middle School, and then was the last class to graduate from Dublin High School. I drove back and forth over the Glick Bridge daily, and often at my own peril. In an era before cell phone distractions, my friend group alone had 4 accidents along Glick and Riverside Drive. More tragically, one student from our class died across from the Columbus Zoo and never got to walk with us at graduation. So do I take this matter personal? Yes, I do. It was dangerous then. It's even more dangerous now. But don't just take my personal experience. I would only hope and assume that you're doing your due diligence and checking with the county engineer's office, ODOT, for traffic studies before you would even consider putting hundreds of new drivers across a 2-lane bridge onto a busy 4-lane road with no median. Keep in mind, it's not just school hours, but these students will be fighting traffic to get to and from sporting events, extracurriculars, along with their siblings, parents, and neighbors trying to attend school events. Now that's a domino effect. Research from the Ohio Highway Patrol shows a higher density of crashes along Riverside Drive over the past 5-year span. This is data you can easily pull from the State Patrol website. Again, don't just take my word for it, go to the experts. I would like to publicly share the view of Shawnee Hills Police Chief Russell Barron directly from his March 23rd board letter, and I quote, "I cannot support any plan that unnecessarily increases student exposure to these corridors. The risks are clear, the data is established, and the consequences are predictable. I invite every board member to come drive the route from Glick to Scioto High School both ways, but be prepared to sit in traffic, because with the current construction of the Dublin Road water plant and the Shawnee Station traffic light, most days traffic backs up almost to Glick Road past Muirkirk Drive. And the bridge in the afternoon is generally a parking lot for commuters coming home. This is not even considering the Muirfield Drive water main replacement project that will start in 2027, pushing more people toward the Glick corridor, or the redevelopment of the Bogey site that will happen eventually. Please follow common sense. Make safety a top priority when comparing any maps. Don't throw away hours of work and thousands of dollars previously done by our superintendent and the past board for a quick fix. In my personal opinion, the true solution is a new high school for Jerome Village. But in any event, don't take Dublin schools back to the future. We deserve a transparent process where any maps are scored with safety first. Thank you.
Jeffrey Dibbert.
Oh, hi guys, thank you for your time. So, we're going to go back in time a little bit actually to map 3, which set a precedent for what DCS considers improved diversity. Memory can't be erased, neither can the drafts. The diversity data presented on map 3 is readily available for the community and the board members. The 2 redistricting processes are not separate processes, but a continuation of one to another, bound by all accessible data and priorities of the people involved. The scoring of the internal planning team demonstrates the desires and priorities of administrators placed on diversity. These desires did not disappear with the start of the new process. They simply inherited new labels, such as academic outcomes, academic performance, and needy students. Any map resembling map 3 this round will also be diversity-driven, regardless of how the community input's interpreted. The benchmark was set with map 1 on draft 9. Nobody mentioned academic outcomes or performance in the first round ever. In fact, DCS emphasized how all 3 high schools offered the same academic opportunity and defended accusations otherwise. A board member even took the time at a board meeting to clarify her stance that there was nothing wrong with Scioto. These concerns were only being raised after diversity was removed from the criteria. The reason I'm mentioning this is the constitutional prohibition against racial discrimination is leveled at the thing, not the name. Be careful, or you're going to get us all in trouble by using diversity and labeling it in the pursuit of something else. It's not worth it, guys. It's not worth it. We've got to be able to protect our students losing money in lawsuits, things of that nature. It's not good. I know a lot of people have lawyered up. A lot of neighborhoods have done this. I don't know who's done what, but we got to be careful with the way that we go forward. And question 3 on the last survey does not get us going in that direction. That survey question was designed to keep Jerome from being assigned to Scioto. I've got all kinds of stuff in here about it, but really it just kind of comes down to not necessarily arguing for a neighborhood, not arguing against a neighborhood, but trying to help out Dublin. So let's see what we can do for all of that. Thank you very much.
Rachel Cleary.
When I signed up for this, I had hoped that I'd be able to allow my son, Zach, to read a letter, but I signed up under my name, and it's against the board policy to allow somebody to speak for you. So I'm going to read the letter that Zach put together for the board. I want everybody to know that these are his words, not mine. So because he can't speak, I'm going to be reading them for him. Hi, I'm Zach from the Bristol Commons neighborhood. I'm a freshman at Kaufman, and these are my thoughts on all the redistricting things that are happening. I'm in the marching band, which takes up a lot of my time in the summers. Since I'm 15 and both of my parents have full-time jobs, I obviously can't drive or get a ride from practice, so I have to bike there every day. Kaufman's relative proximity to my house makes the ride very safe and easy, which I wouldn't really get from a ride to Jerome, and definitely not from one to Scioto. And it's not just me. I see so many kids riding their bikes to school and extracurriculars, and to after-school events such as plays. I want to be able to help and support my 7th grade sister from Gazelle in her community by helping her bike to Kaufman, which I obviously can't do if she doesn't go there. I want to conserve the friendships she has now, because I know how hard it is for girls to keep them themselves. I honestly think that if I went to Scioto, I wouldn't still be in the band. If I wasn't in the band, I would have very few friends and very bad grades. After I lost half my friends from Griselle and the transfer to high school, band has really helped me make some new, really good friends. I've heard people say that boys are in a mental health crisis because of a lack of meaningful relationships. Good community leads to good grades, both of which lead to good people, which leads back into good community. In short, my proximity to Kaufman has allowed me to keep and make friends and really find my place in my community. I want the board to consider biking proximity for redistricting maps as much or more than actual geographic proximity. It would help so many kids, present and future, stay healthy both physically and mentally. Biking matters for so many of us who are trying to create and preserve our overall community. Thanks.
Amber Nisley.
Good evening. My name is Amber Nisley, and I'm a parent of 2 children in the Dublin City Schools. I have a 5th grade daughter at Penny and a 7th grader, Austin, at Griselle. I'm here tonight to advocate for keeping neighborhoods together, and tonight specifically Muirfield Village, that is where I live. Like many families, we chose this community intentionally, not just for the schools themselves, but for what surrounds them, which to me is the most important. The relationships and the sense of belonging that grows over time. For my family, that sense of community has been especially meaningful. My son, Austin, who's a 7th grader at Griselle, has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Duchenne is a fatal muscle wasting disease. My son is in a full-time wheelchair now. When he started kindergarten, he was not. But it's a horrible disease that takes away your muscles over time. With that said, we have experienced firsthand how a strong, connected community can truly and genuinely shape a child's life. But what I'm describing isn't unique to our family. It reflects what so many families in our neighborhood have built together. It didn't happen overnight. It was built over years of shared classrooms and everyday moments. This community has been intentional, parents and students alike, in making sure kids feel included, connected, and supported. Our children have grown up together, they look out for one another, and they really understand each other. That kind of support, I think we can all agree, is not easily recreated. Redistricting, I understand, involves many complex factors. But I would ask that proximity and existing community ties be weighted heavily, especially when the proposed changes send students to the furthest high school. Longer commutes don't just add travel time, they take time away from homework, activities, family, and rest. But beyond logistics, this is about community. Families in this community have invested in these kids. I've seen it firsthand. I've lived it. I've invested into other kids, not just academically, but socially and emotionally. And in return, I have seen our kids invest into each other, which is a beautiful thing. Keeping these students together allows those relationships to continue into high school, where they matter just as much, if not more. I'm asking you to consider not just only the map, but really consider the people and the families, and most importantly, the students within that. Thank you.
Julie Carter.
Hi. Thank you to the board and superintendent for allowing me to speak tonight. The redistricting situation is a simple math problem. I know a lot of time and money has gone into analyzing every possibility, but it doesn't need to be this complicated. There are two possible solutions that address overcrowding at Jerome and available capacity at Scioto, while avoiding legal costs, keeping micro-communities intact, and keeping future levies viable. One, move where the growth is. That meets the goal of disrupting the fewest students and plans for future growth. Or two, keep everything east of the river at Scioto. I believe this would be supported by the Scioto community. This past weekend at the Dublin Classic baseball tournament, Scioto parents and players wore shirts that said, "Just a player from that side of the river." I think they'd welcome their fellow neighbors east of the Scioto and would reduce concerns about bridge traffic and safety. It also aligns with the simplest formula that has yet to be addressed. 3 high schools, 15 elementary schools, 5 feeding into each. Conveniently, there are 5 elementary schools east of the river. A separate item to address is the domino effect, referenced in the recent survey. I'd note that many people I spoke with found that survey confusing because the questions hid what the intentions of the questions were. The domino effect would impact the greatest number of students. It's not just moving 600 students from Jerome, it's shifting students from Jerome to Kaufman to Scioto. That's over 1,000 students, with more dominoes to fall as development continues in Union County. That level of disruption turns many students transient rather than rooted in community. Finally, I would like to add that my children rely on the ability to bike to school and extracurriculars, particularly in the summer when buses are not running. I would request adding biking proximity to the criteria so as not to take away opportunities from current Kaufman students. And please codify letting students who start at high school remain through graduation. Thank you for your time.
Defy Shen, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Good evening. My name is Defei Shen, and I live in Bristol Commons. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to first begin by sharing a very short voice recording from my son.
Hi, my name is Ethan. I'm a freshman at Kaufman. Last summer, I biked to soccer practice and weightlifting pretty much every day. The ride is easy and safe and takes less than 10 minutes. My parents are not available to drive, so if I can't bike, I won't be able to do soccer then. I know my friends and many other kids are like me, biking to sports, clubs, and band activities. So biking is very important.
As you heard, being able to bike to Kaufman for extracurricular activities, sports, Band and clubs is incredibly important for students in our neighborhood. Last summer, my son biked there with his friends almost every day for soccer, sometimes twice a day for both practice and weightlifting, often in the middle of the day. The ride to Kaufman takes about 9 minutes on flat ground, and thanks to the bike tunnel under Brent Road, students cross 0 major intersections. It's safe and accessible. In contrast, if our neighborhood is reassigned to Scioto, the situation changes dramatically. The bike ride would take about 21 minutes over hilly terrain and require crossing multiple major intersections. That makes biking not just difficult, but unsafe, and realistically not an option. This matters because many working parents cannot leave work during the day to drive their children. Our students rely on biking to participate in extracurricular activities, which are a critical part of their education. Without this access, they lose meaningful opportunities. Scioto is a great school. This is not about the quality of the school. It's about what is practical and safe for our students. In addition, the results of your first surveys have shown that prioritizing proximity to a school with biking being a high priority, it is what the community wants. In summary, making biking access to extracurricular activity a priority is not only logical, it directly reflects the needs and the voice of the community. I respectfully ask the board to make the ability to bike to school for extracurricular activities a high priority within the proximity criteria. I also would like to remind the board of your commitment to transparency and to using community input. There are 3 top priorities from the first survey. Plan for future growth, prioritize proximity with biking as a key factor, and minimize the number of students' impact to avoid a domino effect. These priorities are clear and widely supported. I urge you to honor them as you finalize your final criteria. Thank you.
We have now hit the 30-minute mark of public participation, so we are moving on to Dr. Marshausen. Oh, board reports is first.
I have 3. So I will start, if that's okay. So on April 20th, the Senior Citizens Council met for their final meeting of the school year. The Jerome Vocal Chamber Ensemble, led by Mr. Zach Pytel, started the meeting with 3 beautiful vocal performances. The first was a snippet of a piece called Time, and the second one was an amazing piece, I believe it was by Mozart, called Dies Irae, which is considered one of his masterpieces. If you have the opportunity to see them perform, I know I say this every time that we have students perform, but if you do have the opportunity to see them perform, please do it. They were awesome. Dr. Marshausen then gave an update on redistricting. He went over the timeline, the focus groups, and the voluntary survey. He spoke about the full safety drill that's coming up this summer and gave an update on Journey 2030. Some of the questions asked during that meeting, one was, why might we see school buses driving around in the middle of the day? That's because we are transporting high school students to and from Emerald campus during the day, as well as middle school students to and from high school. And also preschool students have a half day, so we're taking them back home. There were questions about the survey and why there were 4 forced choice questions there, and Dr. Marshausen explained that the professionals designed those questions to be forced battery questions on purpose, and that they were based on focus groups and the prior poll. An attendee also asked what had changed from the first redistricting process to this current process. And he explained that it was an entirely in the superintendent's hands before, with not a lot of input from the board. And this time the process is a more open process with input from the board and more public feedback on the front end. Next, Mrs. Althouse introduced Mrs. Julie Alloway, principal at Wright Elementary, Mrs. Renee Schwartz, principal at Wyandotte, and Mrs. Melissa Garris, principal at Thomas Elementary, to give an update on all-day kindergarten. And Mrs. Garris spoke about what a day looks like for a kindergartner and how teachers are able to do so much more academically, being able to slow down and go deeper into the curriculum with all-day kindergarten. Mrs. Schwartz talked about how the district is able to support kindergarten students with additional support such as English learners, literacy support, counseling, and mental health specialists. Mrs. Alloway spoke about the data she's seen at Wright, whereby they have been able to get the same number of students on grade level and half the time this year with all-day kindergarten, which I think is an amazing thing. It was a very rich discussion, and the attendees had many great questions and comments and insight, and I took pages and pages of notes. I think it would be wonderful to invite them all here, actually, to a board meeting so that the entire board could hear about all-day kindergarten, and also so that the community can hear how the district is supporting some of our youngest learners with all-day kindergarten and all the things that they are being able to do through all-day kindergarten. Student Advisory Council met on April 17th. The students started the meeting off by sharing things to know with the superintendent. There are concerns about construction still possibly affecting the AC at Scioto, which I hear is turned on and working now. There's also concern about broken locker room door at Kaufman and the price of prom tickets across the 3 different high schools. Students from all 3 high schools also shared concerns about having enough time for lunch when they have back-to-back AP test. There was a discussion of possibly having a pass so that they could eat lunch sooner or get through lunch more quickly. Students will be participating in the Dublin Community Service Day on Saturday, May 2nd. They will get snacks and a t-shirt and school bus transportation to go out in the community together and assist local seniors who are in need. And also, while students were getting headshots taken, I had the opportunity to ask Asil, one of our student board reps, more about the Dublin Strong event, which took place on April 11th. And I also had the opportunity to ask students to share the biggest impact that serving on the Student Advisory Council had on them, or the biggest impact that they have been able to make as a result. And students spoke about helping to organize the dodgeball tournament and the significant impact that made in our community and the ability to give back. They also spoke about gaining confidence in public speaking and feeling like a valued part of the larger community outside of their individual buildings. They had all great things to say. Tara, if you have, or Mrs. Seward, if you have anything to share, you can jump in.
No, I think you covered it. It was very interesting. It was my first meeting. So still just learning about the students and their concern, but definitely excited to dive in and be able to talk and have that dialogue with the students. So appreciate everyone that's a part of that committee.
Moving on to the PTO leadership meeting, which also took place on April 17th. Mike Nutter with CyberSafe.ai gave a presentation on their app so that the PTOs could share the information with parents that might be interested. Dr. Marshausen, again, gave a redistricting update. Dr. Schwanke explained the upcoming full-scale safety drill, which I assume Dr. Marshausen will probably talk about, maybe, I don't know, but anyhow. Dr. Marshausen and Dr. Schwanke gave an update on Journey 2030, explaining that moving on to new goals doesn't mean the old goals are not being still worked on. There were questions from attendees, including how much of teaching is driven by standardized tests. And Dr. Schwanke explained, generally speaking, that if a teacher is following standards in the graded course of study, they shouldn't really have to worry about the standardized test. There were questions about people possibly taking the voluntary survey multiple times, and Dr. Marshausen explained that Planning Next has a way to filter out duplicate and multiple responses using IP addresses. There was discussion among attendees about how PTOs can help during the redistricting process by collaborating, sharing information, and working together to welcome new families. And an attendee initiated a very heartfelt discussion about public participation and the comments that were made during the last board meeting that seemed to not only speak poorly of Dublin Scioto High School, but also to disparage the students who attend Scioto. And unfortunately, these types of comments are not limited to public participation at board meetings. They are also emailed to the board, shared on social media, and spoken in the community. And I would like to take a moment to speak about this. First, we don't address participants during public participation anymore. We did in the past, but we are again following board policy and best practices by simply listening. The purpose of public participation is for the board to be able to listen to the community and not have back and forth debates. In the past, that has led to some chaotic situations, if I'm being honest. But I do think it is important to address this issue. Redistricting is difficult for many reasons. There are a lot of emotion and uncertainty, which makes this, the possibility of change even more difficult. But we get to choose how we respond to things and what type of community we want to create and what kind of example we want to set for our students. We have Scioto students sometimes in the audience. We have them sitting here as student board reps, and we have to set a good example for them. We have the opportunity to model for our children what it looks like to come together to solve complex problems and share our opinions with civility while respecting our neighbors and our neighbors' children. So please ask yourself before you speak, post, or send something if what you're about to share is helpful or harmful, not just for you personally, but for your neighbor and your community and students as well. Criticism of the district is fair. There are things that could and can be done to improve, and at the same time, implying that any Dublin students are less than others or less desirable to attend school with than others or have lower expectations than others is simply not helpful, and I would argue that it is very harmful. If you are lucky to attend Scioto, you will find that there are students there, too, who have high expectations for themselves, who score in the 30s at their first crack at taking the SAT, but choose to take it 3 more times anyway. Students who score 4s and 5s on their AP exams and strive for perfect scores on all their tests and assignments, earn scholarships, and even go to Ivy League schools. And you will find other students with aspirations who strive for excellence in their own unique ways. But not only that, you will find some of the grittiest kids you will ever meet, some of the strongest, most resilient, most well-rounded humans you will ever meet, and some of the most confident and empathetic students and leaders you will ever meet. And do not mistake that attribute as only attributed to feeder patterns. Culture and care matter as well. And to top it off, you will find some of the most caring, talented, and brilliant teachers and staff you will ever meet at Scioto. If your student gets to come to Scioto, they will be blessed to have teachers who will help churn out scholars with real-world skills and service-minded leaders who will know how to build community with people who may or may not be like them. As a parent of 2 Scioto graduates and 1 current student and a DCS board member, I can say without a doubt that the education a student receives at Scioto is priceless. And lastly, I'll say this. While I'm a Scioto parent, I have a strong love for all the kids in this district. As some of you may know, I was a room parent 8 times at Chapman. I was PTO hospitality coordinator at Davis. I was PTO president at Davis. I was PTO secretary at Scioto, PTO president at Scioto. I served on many district-wide committees, and I was a Dublin Education Foundation board member before I became a DCS board member. I ran networking groups, women's service groups here in Dublin. My kids played club volleyball with other kids across this district. And they played DYA. My husband coached 27, I believe, different DYA teams and created a team for a club team for kids here in Dublin. And through all of this, I've had the privilege to get to know and build relationships with so many members and parents from all over this district. And my kids have made friends with kids all over the district. And I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do if you have an us versus them mentality or don't know anyone from other feeder patterns outside of your own. Please get to know your neighbors and help to build our collective community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. That was definitely needed to be stated. Do we have anybody else that has a committee report? No? Then on to Brick.
Hello, board, and also people that are here. This kind of recently, it hasn't been super busy, which is fun for me as a senior, but not as fun for giving this announcement because I don't get to talk for as long. So prom was super fun. And then on a not fun note, exam season is coming up. Particularly IB exams have already been started to be shown on a board at Emerald Campus. And then AP exams are also going to be starting very shortly in May. The Kaufman Percussion Ensemble is performing right now, actually, so that's exciting. The Drama Club is presenting One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on May 7th through 9th, so anyone that can should be in attendance at that. And most recently, Mamma Mia was also very successful at Kaufman for theater. At Scioto, you can buy tickets for the Scioto Theater Department's presentation of Frozen. Among the high schools, Scioto's theater program is exceptional. Anyone that is able to go see that should. Scioto veteran baseball game will be tomorrow at 6, and again, prom was a success. For Emerald Campus, the Columbus Zoo Teen Echo Summit, several students presented their CAS, Creativity, Activity, and Service projects to peers from across the state, community partners, and environmental leaders. That's super cool. The Delaware-run Rye-Partisan Restoration Project is an IB Diploma CAS project, planting 750 native trees and shrubs on April 19th in partnership with the City of Delaware as part of a larger environmental restoration project, which that was also very successful. TOK exhibitions, Theory of Knowledge. TOK expeditions were completed by IB Diploma juniors. Rising IB Diploma students, currently sophomores, had the opportunity to participate in engaging discussions regarding the presentations. Wow, I said that I wouldn't talk for very long. I lied. I didn't read all the Emerald Campus stuff. Biomedical Research Academy has been representing Dublin City Schools on many experiences across Columbus, including the Columbus Zoo, OSU Wexner Cancer Research Center, and will be participating in the Healthcare Summit this Wednesday. Guys, I have 2 more things. Young Professionals Academy, run by Mr. Musa, has reached new heights, having 2 students also participating in Aviation Academy who are completing their internship hours at OSU Airport while simultaneously completing their pilot's license. That is incredible. And then that will be all. Thank you.
Now, Dr. Marshausen.
Thank you, Mrs. Messick. Before I get into my report, at the request of Mrs. Messick, I'd like to make a brief statement about my recent candidacy for the superintendent position at the ESC of Central Ohio. The ESC of Central Ohio serves 32 school districts and nearly 250,000 students in Central Ohio. It is a leadership opportunity and job that opens only about once every 12 to 15 years. It's a job that allows a superintendent to have a deeper reach and set broader goals for the Central Ohio region. When I decided to apply, I immediately informed President Messick, and I met with the board to share my intentions, the timetable, and my rationale for exploring this professional option. It was an honor to be named as a finalist in such a competitive process, and my friend and colleague, Michael Sawyers, will do an excellent job. I've had the opportunity to speak with Michael and congratulate him several times. I am deeply grateful for this board's support and conversations during the process. I believe the work that we've done together and your support makes us a stronger administrative team. We've identified ways we can work better together, especially with the challenges that are ahead with redistricting. At no point during the ESC search or any other future professional endeavors will I give anything but my best to this district. This board has been able to watch the work that we've done over the past several weeks, and each of them would share that we've had multiple conversations and continued down the transparent path of the work that is ahead for the Dublin City Schools. As we look at redistricting, I want to be clear. I've asked this board for a detailed resolution providing the criteria that the superintendent will utilize in completing a final redistricting map. That work does not change, and I look forward to working with the 5 of you as well as our team in the work that we have ahead. Now, some fun news. I am excited to announce that on tonight's board agenda, we are recommending Mr. Wayne Tsai to be the next principal at Dublin Kaufman High School and Dr. Brian Arnold to be the next principal at Dublin Jerome High School. When we have administrators such as Mr. Aron, who's in the back of the room, who grow and seek new professional opportunities with the ability to go to the Bexley City Schools and serve in a central office leadership position, it allows us to tap the skills of those that we have grown internally to step into new leadership roles. And I know that both Wayne and Brian are ready to step up to these challenges, have built relationships with the staffs that they serve, and are prime examples of what we do in Dublin, which is grow our talent pipeline. So later tonight, when we have an opportunity during the HR agenda, we will once again congratulate Wayne and Brian for their new leadership roles in the Dublin City Schools. A couple things that we've been working through that I think the board needs to be aware of and our community needs to be aware of. Last week, Governor DeWine held a press conference in which he launched a statewide attendance dashboard. At this time, Dublin is not participating in that statewide attendance dashboard, and I wanted to explain to you all why. In a lot of districts across Ohio, mostly our smaller districts, their ITCs or technology hubs handle their attendance data, and that data is seamlessly transferred from their ITC directly to this new dashboard. In larger districts like Dublin, Hilliard, other neighboring suburban Columbus districts, we host our own student information system. Many of you are familiar with Infinite Campus. We anticipated, and there were, challenges with the transfer of data from Infinite Campus districts, from Power School districts, to the state's dashboard. This is one of those situations where we wanted to let other people go through the growing pains before we started jumping into this process. We have every intention to be part of the statewide attendance dashboard in the 26-27 school year. We just want to ensure that there's accurate data that's shared at the state level and community level. We also have another challenge, and it's this building and the number of students that we have taking College Credit Plus. As we look at the number of students who are moving all around this community and this district during the school day, I think Mrs. Marple, 3,000 students with CCP, 1,800 students who are here. A lot of that attendance information we need to make sure is correct. Moms and dads, you sign forms that say, I know my kid's going to be moving around. We have students taking asynchronous online classes who may be in a proctored study hall, maybe in a classroom. we have to clean up what we're doing with all this if we're going to report who's where and when. And it leads to one more fact that I want to share with the board, because I'm sure you will get these emails and conversations. We have a number of students who are taking College Credit Plus courses second semester of their senior year. There are a number of them who are taking courses that they need for graduation. Many are taking their 4th English credit, which is required for graduation. When kids take College Credit Plus courses, we don't get progress reports, we don't get their grades. Mom and dad are responsible for their performance in the college class. Really, the kid's responsible for their performance in the college class. We've had some students start to give us a little bit of a heads up that they may fail their English course through College Credit Plus. We're going to have college-bound students who don't graduate. The 4th English credit is a requirement. We can't waive it. There were opportunities for students to test out of those courses, but those opportunities have since passed. So just want to let us all know that if there are seniors who fail College Credit Plus courses, not only are mom and dad responsible for paying for that course, which is the state law, there are going to be kids who don't graduate. They will go to summer school. They may still earn their diploma in time to go to the college that they've gotten into, but they won't walk. We'll hold a summer graduation, and that's the reality of College Credit Plus, the way that it's set up right now.
Can I just add into that, the reason why we do not find out anything until CCP lets us know is that it's by federal law. So by federal law, we are not permitted to know, or neither are parents, so they sign that away as well. So the only people that know whether or not the child is passing is the child or the teacher. Parents are not permitted to call college professors due to FERPA laws. So we have no way to find out ahead of time if this is happening.
I have a question. Is this on a greater scale than in the past, or is?
Yeah, we have seen an exponential increase in the number of students who are taking College Credit Plus courses. We have seen a significant increase in the number of students who are opting to take asynchronous courses through Columbus State as a way to sleep late, as a way to leave early, as a way to have more flexibility in their schedule. And one of the things that we've started talking about as a team, and one of the things that I know is taking place at the state level, are conversations that many of our 16, 17, and 18-year-olds aren't ready for that level of freedom and that level of flexibility. There were some of us who, when we were actually 18, 19, and 20, when we had that level of freedom and flexibility and went to college, may have been unequipped to handle it without some bumps along the road. This is going to be an unfortunate situation, but we cannot sidestep what requirements are or manufacture 3 2-week credits that a kid could earn in English 12th grade in. That demeans what our teachers do in our classrooms every day, and that demeans the work that students do. I know our counselors work on this with kids. We never want a student to have a required course second semester senior year, because again, we don't hire the college professors. We know the teachers that are in our classrooms. They're amazing. When you have an adjunct and you have a college professor, there are times that there are challenges with that. And unfortunately, it's just part of the reality. I wanted to give the 5 of you a heads up, because there will be heart-wrenching stories of students who are college-bound, high-performing students, and if they've stopped doing the work in CCP during the spring of their senior year, it's going to be a challenge. So I just wanted to give you a heads up.
I also want to make mention that we cannot prevent, due to state law, students from taking CCP. So we can maybe dictate a little bit what courses they can take, but if it is core courses that gets dual enrollment credit, we have no ability starting down in middle school. Students in middle school can start taking CCP, and we can't prevent that. It's a parent decision.
And we have students who are trying to get alternative credit for courses during the summer to check off a PE or a health course so that they can take more CCP classes. We'll have a 5-point graduate at some point because we'll have kids who figure out how to play the system for GPA. It's not necessarily what's best for their education. And I think there are conversations that we will have and that are starting to take place about the original intent of CCP, the goal of making college more affordable for parents, but that would require that those courses that students are taking are aligned with degree programs at the next level, and some of the things that we're witnessing right now are not aligned with degree programs in the future.
So, quick question. You had mentioned that the guidance counselors are helping the kids along and making some of these decisions as far as the required courses. Do the parents know, I guess, that that's where they are at that point, that, you know, if they do fail this course, that they're going to be in this situation ahead of time, I guess?
Mrs. Marple looks like she keeps trying to push the button, so I'm going to step back for a second.
Thank you, Dr. Marchhausen. I do want to let the board know we have ramped up our advisement around CCP as we've watched these numbers go up, 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 up. So today we have approximately 3,500 CCP courses that aren't within Dublin City Schools. So that's not even including the ones we do have in-house here. That's a lot, right? So as we've seen that go, yes. And law requires pre-advisement. So there's a ton of documents that families have to sign off on before they can even enter in, their children can enter into the CCP program. There's nights, information nights. Just this week, a coordinator at central office and our pathways counselor were out in buildings setting up appointments with individual students to help advise them on CCP. So this is a huge thing. We spend a lot of time advising. But people still have in their mind what they want to do, and that's fair, right? But we will just continue to make sure everybody understands the risks involved and continue to try to encourage students when they do take those second semester senior courses, especially if they don't have a track of success yet in college level courses, to maybe have some sort of like backup plan in place. We do that now, but oftentimes, Dr. Marchhausen's correct, students are looking for ways to maybe have that more flexible college-like schedule where maybe the maturity of the student isn't yet ready for that.
Sorry, and one more question. When we said that it was federal law that the parents wouldn't be aware of the grade, once they're in college, I know that you can opt, or the child can give you access to that information. Is that not the same for the College Credit Plus?
It is. They can waive it, but that does not necessarily mean that the professor needs to speak to the parent. It just means that the student can share that information and provide it, but it does not mean that the professor will reach out to the parent at any time.
But you can still have access to, like right now, I got access to access to my son's grades.
Yes,
for college.
of course.
Okay.
Right. You can have access to your child's grades if your child signs that waiver. Right. And that is key as well, is that the parents can't sign that waiver. It has to be the child.
Okay. And that still applies. I just want to make sure that still applies for College Credit
Right,
Plus.
but that does not mean that College Credit Plus will reach out to parents or the school to let them know. So the guidance counselors, they can tell them, hey, if you don't pass this, you're not going to graduate. But the guidance counselor has no idea whether or not they're actually passing.
Right, okay.
Mrs. Seward, too, if I may, what we see our students struggling with a little bit is, you might remember that college professor who maybe had a midterm and a final. That's what it was. And so parent might have access, but there's nothing to see. And I think that's what some of our students struggle with. They go in thinking that if they missed an assignment, their teacher will come on down to study center and check on them. And there's not that, and there's not enough grade opportunities to build that back up. And they're just not ready for that, or didn't look at the syllabus closely enough.
Okay, moving on. There's a star. We are here. We are here at April 27th, where the board will review survey results and have a conversation about potential criteria and priorities through the redistricting process. After tonight, Mrs. Messick and Mrs. De Silva will work to create a draft resolution with the district's legal counsel that will then turn into a first reading of boundary criteria 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, May 11th. Also by May 11th, we will review with the board submissions for the request for proposal process from map-making companies. The community will have time after that first reading to share their thoughts and ideas with the Board of Education. And then on May 21st, which is a Thursday, and it's a Thursday because of graduations and Memorial Day, the board would award a contract to a map-making firm and adopt the criteria that will be given to that firm that the firm will then use to create a map for high school redistricting. At this time, when we put the RFP together, the map-making firms are putting their proposals together with a knowledge that we expect a map ready for presentation at the June 29th board meeting. So that timeline is known to the map-making firms as they put their proposals together. Now, Planning Next hosted for us a voluntary participation survey. And that voluntary participation survey was open from April 16th to April 20th. It contained 6 questions. 2 of them were demographic, and 3 were focused on redistricting. There were 3,484 responses to Planning Next's survey. When it asked how folks were associated with the district, 81.7% of the respondents were parents or guardians of children in the district, followed by community members without school-aged children. This is an inverse relationship to the number of people in our community who have students in the district. About 30% of our residents have students in the district, and about 70% of the residents in the school district as a whole do not have students in our schools. So this is very heavily parent-weighted as we look at this survey. When we look at the grade levels that people responded to, and these numbers could exceed 100% because you could put more than one grade level. The plurality of those who responded were in the 6th to 8th grade parent range. Parents who would likely be most impacted. That is the plurality of respondents for the grade level of parents who participated. The attendance areas represented in the survey are heavily weighted to the Jerome attendance area. 61.4% of the respondents identified as living in the Jerome attendance area, with only 32% of the respondents in the Kaufman attendance area, and 5.9% of the respondents from the Scioto attendance area. Which redistricting approach was supported by those respondents? 53% prioritized proximity, and 47% prioritized minimize the total number of students moved. When looking at what was the most important consideration in a forced battery choice, travel time to school at nearly 55%, outscored mileage to school, which was at 44.9%. In the open-ended responses, and this will all be posted on the website tonight or tomorrow morning, as will all of the responses in the Excel spreadsheet for anyone who wants to go through the 84 pages. Proximity and transportation, Comments such as they should be able to walk to the nearest school. Transportation safety was a top concern and mentioned in 23% of the open-ended comments. And bus ride length of time and commute time were closely related at 18.3% of those who put comments in. When talking about overgrowth in capacity, nearly 1 in 5, or close to 20%, talked about residential development driving redistricting and think that newer communities should be assigned before established neighborhoods. Respondents also commented that housing was approved without consideration for what that new housing development would do for schools. Open-ended comments about community and social impact. Strong themes about neighborhoods and peer groups mentioned in 1 in 5 surveys. Concerns about disruption and separation of children from friends, especially at middle school and high school. Talk about feeder pattern continuity. It was raised in 7.5% of the comments, and many advocated for grandfathering current students so they could finish at the school that they start. Fairness and balance. There were calls for socioeconomic diversity across all 3 high schools, not to concentrate the lower income populations at one school. There were also comments for prioritizing what's best for students, not just catering to the loudest voices. Comments asked the district to be transparent, to use data from the engagement process, and to follow through on all of the decisions. So those are things that were there. Before we start our conversation as a board, I do want to talk about the 3 tools that we used here, because it's critical that we understand the strengths and weaknesses of the tools that were used. Focus groups, knowing who is in the focus groups, knowing that the focus groups were derived from previous work that the district had done, and they were folks who had a history with the district and a history working in focus groups with us. We know they were not representative of the whole community. We know they were people who were familiar with the processes and what we do in the Dublin City Schools. There's a strength and a weakness. We know Paul Fallon's public opinion survey. It is scientifically accurate. It has a margin of error of less than 4%. It is random sampling. The weakness to random sampling is people may not buy in as much if they say things, because we've heard it, well, I didn't get a call and neither did any of our friends, so we weren't part of this. Those types of comments, when you do a sample size and N size of 500 in a community of 90,000, you start to get some of those comments. So we know the random sampling process provides us with scientifically accurate data. It's also less granular. It's more 30,000 foot, because in the amount of time people can respond to short text messages or poll surveys, it's shorter information. The community-wide survey is voluntary. As we see in this survey, there is an over-participation from one part of the community. It doesn't mean that that's not valid. It just means we need to understand as we have our discussions, when you look at the responses to questions 3 and 4, that 60+% of the people who filled out the survey are from the Jerome attendance area. So those things we all need to take into account as you have those conversations. We talked about transparency. We talked about greater engagement. You asked for greater engagement as we restarted this process. There are 3 tools that were used, and now I think it's important that the board have the opportunity to have those conversations about the data, about the tools. I will answer any questions, and our team will answer any questions if there are things that you would like from us during the conversation and discussion.
Before we dive into the discussion, can you explain just a little bit about how the questions were created, like how Planning Next came up with the questions, and Fallon? I know when I first looked at the question, the board, by the way, did not create the questions. And when I first looked at the questions, I had questions about the questions. But I did, just in my research and spare time, looked at some video of a school district not in our area that had done redistricting last year, and they were putting together a focus group, and they were asking, what kind of potential questions would you ask a focus group? And one of the questions actually was, do you value minimizing the impact on students, impacting less students, or looking at it long-term? So that is a question that seems to be commonly asked by people who make maps, but can you explain and speak more about how those were created?
The questions that Planning Next and Paul Fallon worked for the first focus group work and the survey that was done by Paul Fallon were derived from your input at the work session in which we put the stickies up on the board. So we hired a professional firm to run a work group session with you. The board was able to put together your thoughts, your concerns, your ideas. Those were put up on boards in this room, and your input led to Planning Next and Fallon Research creating the questions that were part of the focus groups and part of the public survey that was done. Planning Next then, after watching the board meetings and being part of board meetings and being here on the community-wide survey, looked to provide clarifying information to what were probably the two outstanding issues from the previous work. There were some things that were, I would say, asked and answered by the Fallon survey. Mrs. Messick actually asked the question, are we all good with saying that students who start high school get to finish where they started? I anticipate that would be part of a resolution, but we didn't need to ask that again because that was one of the things that, as a board, Planning Next had kind of a check mark. Okay, we did this. We didn't ask is, in the second survey, do we need to ask about shifting some middle school attendance boundaries of better middle school alignment provides for long-term solutions? That was kind of asked and answered. If we have to tweak some middle school attendance boundaries to ensure that student cohorts will stay together, that's something that can be put in the resolution. We didn't ask, should we look long-term? We don't want this to be something that lasts 3 to 5 years. The stress and divisiveness this creates in our community, we really want a 10-year solution. So as we look at our enrollment data and the projections in the available land, one of the things that you would do is create more space where more space is going to be needed in the future. That was kind of asked and answered. So the last survey was very short at the advice of the experts because there was no reason to re-ask questions that we believed were clear, that they believed were clear from the both focus groups and polling data.
Thank you.
Because we've gotten this question, and it was echoed tonight as well in some of the speeches, when we shortened the timeline, did we take anything out that we were planning on doing to do so?
No, this again comes after conversations with all of you and at the request of Mrs. De Silva. Once the decision was clearly made that we're not going to move current high school students, the concern about next year's freshmen sitting in school and finding out that they're not going to stay in that school, that concern kind of went away. And with that concern off the table, what we've done in accelerating the process is running a parallel process of getting requests for proposals while you all work on your resolution. And those two things run separately. That we were going to put them end to end. We were going to wait till there was a resolution, then do a request for proposal, issue a contract to a map-making firm at the end of August or beginning of September, say there's no rush, we need this by the end of October. By running those parallel processes, it doesn't change your timeline for creating that resolution. It just had our team working with Mr. Stark, who understands how to do RFPs all the time and how to get that together, reaching out and identifying the firms to send the RFP to. So it didn't change what you all are doing. Instead of stacking them one after the other, just had those two things running parallel.
I just wanted to go back to the survey really quickly, surveys. The last community survey, just from what I heard, I know that there was some confusion on what the questions really meant, because I know specifically for question 3, I think in some people's mind you could do both. Like, to have to pick one or the other, you could do proximity and you could minimize the number of students. So I think there was a little bit of confusion in what it was asking, especially with that domino effect piece on there. And then in question 4, I heard like people trying to pick or rank one of them, and when you picked it, it moved it to the top. I had, people kind of just, and sent to the board also some emails just saying it was just confusing on what to pick. So I'm saying that to just bring in the fact that that last one, I believe we did have some of those already answered in the Fallon survey, and so now we almost have conflicting data across those 2 surveys. I guess as a board, or even, Dr. Marsh, how do you see now that we asked and answered that from like a statistical piece with the Fallon survey, and now we have kind of that conflicting data now in the community survey?
First of all, and I'm not a statistician, and I don't think a statistician would say that there is anything valid about the voluntary participation survey. This last survey, from a statistical standpoint, and it's been a while since I took a stats class, but I can tell you there's nothing statistically valid about the last survey. Anything that's voluntary participation, it all depends who chooses to do it. If there were, it would be within the margin of error. Because when I saw that survey, when I set my eyes on it, I'm like, okay, this doesn't tell us anything. Because 1, it was overpopulated by Jerome. 2, they were both within 5-6 percentage points of each other. And ultimately, Mrs. Seward, I think the board's going to have to make a decision. And I think this board, as the elected representatives of the community in a representative democracy, does have to make a decision when it comes to a resolution, and the 5 of you are going to have to pick priorities that you believe will be in the best long-term interest of the Dublin City Schools.
Did we start that conversation now with the criteria? Is that where we want to go with that?
We can, and if so, I'm going to start with a statement from Chris Valentine, and I want to be clear, this is not me, this is a statement from Mr. Valentine. I apologize that I am unable to attend this evening due to sickness. I obviously hope to be a part of our group discussion. In my 23 years of being on the board, I've only seen our community navigate one other issue of this magnitude, COVID. To the extent possible, I would like a solution that reduces or eliminates the possibility of future redistricting. We cannot move forward with a map that brings us back to the drawing board in 5 years. The maps provided must prioritize feeder systems from high school to middle school to elementary school. We should not be splitting small numbers of students from their peers as they advance to the next K-12 building. This includes elementary school to middle school. Safety is an important and valid criteria for all areas of our district. However, we have been presented with valid arguments from the north, the central, and the south regarding student safety. I don't know how we break down this criteria: number of accidents, speed limit, miles traveled, traffic time, number of roundabouts. If students can reasonably walk or bike to a school, I do not believe that they should be moving them. Decisions related to academics and extracurricular activities should be based around equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. And I do not believe socioeconomics should be an overarching criteria. If the majority of the board believes that it should be an overarching criteria, then I believe it has to be applied across all levels of our K-12 buildings. It should not just apply to 2 high school buildings or only at the high school level. This hasn't been discussed previously, but I would like the board to consider assigning all continuous undeveloped land to Dublin Scioto. Additionally, I continue to support current high school students staying at their current high school. And that is the end of his statement.
So I think the first thing, because I do think that we're pretty much all aligned on this as far as the grandfathering in, can we maybe just speak to that piece so that people can feel more comfortable about the high schoolers that are currently in high school?
Yes, I agree. I think we've already established that. I think the only person I haven't heard from probably is you, Ms. McLean, on that one. During the board meeting, I think we all said we're in support of keeping students who are currently in high school at the school that they are currently at.
I thought we voted on that last time, and we said that we were good with that.
We didn't take an official vote, but we did express that we were good with that.
Yeah, anything that we can put parents' minds at ease at this point, I think will go a long way towards making the redistricting a little less scary. And so I think the questions we can answer now will be helpful, and then as we work through some of the things that maybe are a little bit more, take a little more brain power, we'll work through those too.
And I would just like to say, because I think it is important for the community to know that there will be, and I know Dr. Marsh hasn't mentioned this before, but I just want to explain it again, that as we write the resolution, we will be writing it with legal counsel to make sure that the resolution is in alignment with all legal requirements, taking into consideration the community feedback. And also, there will be a first reading and a second reading, and the community can comment on that first reading. There will be public participation. You can comment. And then again, before we actually vote on it, you'll have opportunity for public participation at that meeting as well. And I think just again, going on some of the things that we know that the community wants, we know that we just mentioned that we want the community wants kids to be able to remain in the high school that they're in. The other thing that we talked about that we agreed on was that walkers or non-transport students would remain non-transport students, so they will remain at the high school because it doesn't make sense to bus them. I think we agreed on that as well. But you guys, obviously, if you've changed your mind,
yeah.
Please.
Well, I think to that point, if we're talking about just specific to the high school, I think that gets encompassed in the proximity piece almost organically. But if we need to specify that, the biking and the walking may go outside of that non-transport zone if we're thinking about proximity. So I guess I want to be clear on including certain things in proximity that would also already capture the non-transport, in my mind.
And in that situation, we're going to have to use our legal counsel because the issue arises is what is okay for one family is not okay for another family. So what one parent will allow their child to do, to walk or ride their bike, another family won't. Right now, we have people that live in the non-transport zone that we get emails from saying, my child can't walk that far. So again, it runs a gamut. So that is not quantifiable if that makes sense, in a sense that, I might let my child ride their bike, but my neighbor won't let them. So how do you quantify that with distance? Because that's really a parent choice.
Well, for sure, I think the non-transport, because you're not providing transportation, needs to be specified. But I think for the proximity, if we're thinking about, we do have the, tunnels and paths and things like that we can probably look at and include, I would hope, in this, because if we're changing, when we're thinking about proximity in some of those, and I think that's the culture of a lot of our central car, like we said, just in our PTO meetings, we were talking about the amount of kids that are riding their bikes to cars, just, so, and then when we hear about, people biking to Kaufman and things like that, I think it just needs to be included in the conversation of proximity, maybe separate from the non-transport, but I just want to be clear that it gets captured somewhere, that we saw also in the survey was important.
I agree. Again, it just comes down to what data point do we use, and how to actually quantify something that is unquantifiable, which is where we're at with that. I do agree that, and with when we also talk about proximity, we have to look at, just because a area might be close enough to walk or ride their bike does not mean it's safe for them to walk or ride their bike.
Right.
And so we would be busing them. So that is something that when we look at proximity, we're looking at it from a standpoint of who do we have to bus, so it's not necessarily what parents decide, it's more or less what does the school district have to decide on who to bus and who not to bus. Because the transport part that
Is the
we
busing
deal
piece.
with is about busing.
Yes, so I think that's separate. So I just want to make sure that that's not where we stop, I guess. That's what I'm saying. Non-transport is for the busing piece, but then in proximity, we pick up additional considerations, and maybe that's a separate conversation as far as proximity. The one piece I did have that I did want to bring up with proximity was that we can say that people will not attend the high school that's the farthest away, and we're talking about distance, travel time. Is that something that we can commit to?
Are you asking me?
I'm just putting it out there for the board, I guess.
Okay.
The board's making a decision on that. I'm like, is that something that we commit, that we will not send kids to their farthest high school by travel time?
I think you'd be putting a map maker in a bad spot. This is just, as someone who thinks about what you're going to give to someone who's going to make a map, when you have negatives in there, I think you're going to start to have problems. I also think, and part of this also depends on what the 5 of you decide, there have been talks about undeveloped land being sent to the school that has the most space. That might be, you could create counter priorities and criteria if you say you can't go to the furthest school unless you're in currently undeveloped land, because that might prohibit undeveloped land from going to Scioto, because it's probably the furthest school in terms of distance and travel time. So I think you probably don't. My encouragement to the board would be to not create criteria that is in direct conflict with other criteria you create.
The way that I'm looking at it is that we create the criteria based on the priorities that we do want. So if we want to prioritize proximity and, impacting the least amount of students, then we say prioritize proximity and moving the least amount of students. Phrase it in what you do want so that it's not hard for them to figure out, I guess.
Well, I do want kids to not have to go to their farthest high school. That's something I just, don't want that to
So
happen.
So you're prioritizing going to the closest school.
It doesn't have to be, I mean,
Or-
there's
or
3 high schools, so it's
the
either
one
the
or two.
first or second, I guess. But what I wouldn't want is them to go to their farthest. And I also, there is a separate piece that I did agree, I think Chris had mentioned that in his piece, which I was also, the undeveloped land to Scioto, I do think that that is something that I would like to do. However, if we're saying that that's in like the northern piece of,
That's a contradiction the way you're
well,
saying it.
Yeah,
isn't the farthest,
that's a
what would be the
contradiction.
farthest? What, is that, I mean, if you think about, I think it's Kaufman, actually, because I mean, you're talking about super
Well,
north.
how far, what is the farthest point of undeveloped land, I guess, is
It's like
what
on
we would need to
42.
figure out. if
That's
we're-
42. I mean, so you would have it would probably be like 12 to 13 minutes to Jerome, and then the same to Scioto, travel time wise.
Here, I think, is the problem when we get into specifics. You say 12 to 13 minutes. Someone's going to say, is that at 8 in the morning? Is that at 4 at night? Is that on a bus? Is that on a car? Is that home road? Is that Riverside Road? My encouragement to the board would be positive statements of intent, prioritized, without creating the negative processes. And obviously, it's your decision as a board. My recommendation would be that you don't start thinking about neighborhoods and areas.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
a-
it should be criteria.
Well, we're talking about future growth.
Well, here's the
right?
thing,
We have to
I-
look at where that is. If we want to prioritize future growth, we have to think about where that is going to be. Where is that that we know of? And maybe that does break for the underdeveloped land, but they know what they're buying into at that point. So you've already said, this is where you're going to build. Like, right now, people aren't, they think that they're going to go to a certain school. But if you're building and you know that that's where you're going to go, I think that then the criteria to that isn't in the redistricting process. That's almost separate because it's the people that are here.
So I really think that the main problem comes in is like where Dr. Marshausen lives. Dr. Marshausen is an equidistance from all 3 buildings.
Same.
And so
Same.
so when we put a criteria like that together, what do you do with that? So that's where I'm thinking we can't really quantify that again. And
Those are exceptions, not the rule, but also I'm the
can't-
furthest.
We can't always be making exceptions. This RFP that we put together has to be something that is good for the district as a whole.
Yeah.
And what the district as a whole wants. And we can't be thinking about this of what communities move and what communities don't move. It has to be based on what the map maker does. They are the experts at making sure that that all students get to a school that is by proximity. So we're
Right, I
using
agree.
proximity, but I don't think we need to put
Okay, if we say first or second school.
I don't think we need to do that when we're already mentioning proximity. It's the same thing as what you said about not having to talk about non-transport. We are putting proximity in there. I'm not sure why we need to do that when it will make things difficult when people live in equidistance from 2 or 3 schools. And I know you're going to say that that's an exception, but then you also want to make an exception for the new growth.
Well,
That's
not an
helping
exception.
us
If you
decide.
include traffic, let's say the next piece is traffic and safety, right? And if you're talking about, I mean, we live pretty much around the same area. Once you include traffic and safety to the equation, there is a piece that becomes more clear on where the farthest would be for you.
I just want to take a step back as I looked at Mr. Stark during the last part of this conversation. If you isolate new growth, we would be running multiple bus routes to the same areas to different schools, which would significantly increase transportation costs. So if you say houses that are in an area already get to go here, any new builds have to go here, and it's in the north or northwest portion of our district, now you would be sending buses into an area, potentially, and one of the things that we talked about, keeping neighborhoods and kids together. Are you going to have this side of the street that was built after 2026 go to a different school than this side of the street that was built before 2026? And are we going to run one bus that runs to Jerome and one bus that goes to Scioto through the same neighborhood? So there becomes a significant cost. We've been able to say, thanks to the work of Mr. Stark and Mr. Killian, that redistricting will not have a significant change in transportation costs. That's predicated on groups of neighborhoods staying in the same school, same place. And the one job classification that we are unable to get to our desired capacity is bus drivers. So I would encourage the board, as we look at potential carve-outs, to keep that in mind.
What I don't want to do in this process is try to create the map or create a criteria that creates a map. And I feel like that's kind of like what this conversation is kind of trying to do without doing.
I think we're trying to solve for future growth also.
I think that's part of the map maker's job. They can pull the data and look at the, you know, the projected growth and things like that, which we don't have with us at this moment. But if we can tell them what our priorities are, then they can build the map around those priorities.
So the undeveloped land to Scioto, is that something that we're not thinking about doing then?
Not specifically that I have been aware of just of isolating out the undeveloped land.
So this is the first that I am hearing about it, because we have not been building maps. I know people think that we build maps. I don't know. The board does not build maps. And so what I have been thinking about is, what does the community want as far as criteria, not which neighborhoods are going to go where in the future and all of this kind of stuff. Really just following the process of figuring out what does the community value, and trying to decide how we create a criteria around that.
Okay, so
and not creating, carve-outs that go against some of the things that we say or that the community has said that they value.
Okay, so in the survey it said future growth, like make sure that we account for future growth. How are we including that in our criteria?
Dr. Marshalson, can you explain how we work with map-making companies and how they do projections and use that to draw boundaries?
I think what a map maker would do is look at the enrollment projections at all three high schools. When you look at the enrollment projections for Dublin-Jerome High School, there is a point at which Dublin-Jerome would potentially get to near 3,000 students. And when you look at the capacity at Jerome hitting a maximum at a point where we probably could comfortably have 2,400 kids at Jerome, as we've done that in the past, and for good or bad, a lot of our juniors and seniors aren't in the high schools at all the times. A lot of them are here. We talked about College Credit Plus and so forth. A map maker would look at those projections and lower Jerome's attendance to provide room for that to grow to that point in the future. When we look at Dublin-Kaufman's current projections, Dublin-Kaufman remains relatively stable over the next 10 years, even decreasing by 50 to 80 students over the next 10 years. So you would take those things into account, and a map maker would look at, we have some data that's available to the public. I think it's all posted online and available to map makers. Not only do we have enrollment projections, we have housing studies. In housing studies to identify where there is developable land and what is that land currently zoned for. So we have the studies, we have the projections, and those are all things that if we direct a map maker to say, we want this built so that we don't have to do this again until 2035 at the earliest, they would take those projections into account when deciding who's going to go where. Some of this is hard numbers. Our current kindergarten class, I believe, is the class of 2036 or 37. Is that right? Like 12 years out, 13 years out from now. So we know where those kids are, and we know it's coming. So, and it doesn't take a lot when you look at the charts to see there are a lot more fourth graders in Jerome's attendance zone than there are seniors in Jerome's attendance zone. The people who are moving into the new houses have younger kids, and they're coming. Does that answer that?
Yes. However, isn't it, so, but I guess my point is, we work with the map makers to figure all that out, and then they draw the map based on what we tell them. So I don't want to over tell them things to do and like do their job
So in the
for them.
criteria, we're just going to say account for future growth.
Yes.
Okay. So what's the criteria I think that we're going to include that as a board? What do we think that we're going to include?
Well, I think it's going to be proximity and moving the least number of students, and those two came out, you know, based on the Fallon survey, pretty close. So it's going to take our lawyer to help us write that in terms of how we state it to show that those two are about equal for what we want, while taking growth into consideration. So I think that that's pretty much what the community has said, that they want proximity, that they want future growth to be accounted for, and they want to move the least number of students. So those are the three things that are clear. If we put too many parameters around that, then it becomes really difficult to meet all three of those.
So is traffic and safety a consideration?
Absolutely, with proximity.
It's under proximity?
I would imagine that traffic and safety would be part of proximity. We're looking at busing, we're looking at transportation.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I would say that everything that isn't in board policy would be incorporated into the resolution. Like first and foremost, it has to follow board policy, and there are certain things that just are inherent in what we have a responsibility to do, like the equal opportunities, making sure, you know, ensuring safety, that kind of stuff automatically would go in there. I feel like that's an automatic.
I'm sorry, I thought you were just referring to the extra criteria, but yes, what's in our 5120 has to be in there. And then what the other part of that 5120 is part of that proximity. But yeah, safety is one of the criteria that is already listed in there, as well as academics.
I was just reviewing some of the information in the past. I just want to make sure also middle schools, because we talked about middle school feeders, that those have a kind of a natural breaking point across middle school to high schools, and that was one of the choices to create a better flow for the high schools, and that the middle school options, that's just part of the whole overall feeder pattern that the kids, so there's not like a 90-10 split.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's another point that the community really values, clear feeder patterns and as equal or even feeder patterns as possible. I think that should go in there.
I mean, I think it addresses things like, kids concerned that they're not going to be with their friend groups, or that they have that opportunity to have a friend group that then can help expand the friend group as they get into the high schools. I know that's been a concern that people have addressed, that, so many of them go to a particular middle school and then they get split off and they become, a lone student in a bigger high school. So I think, not a 50-50, not a 60-40, I'm not good with math, not a 45-55, if I get that right. But just the opportunity so those middle schools have like more of a larger group goes to the high schools, and then they have that opportunity to get their new friend groups to come in to the friend group they already have.
I believe it's on the website that no less than 30%, but of a.
On the website?
Is that on there? No. Where did I see that?
It's something about something about being split more than 2 ways, and I think that we should qualify that as like no greater than.
Correct. Yeah, I think it should definitely be no more than 2 ways, not 3 ways, since there's only 3 high
three's
schools.
a lot.
Yeah.
And
Especially for some of our smaller
middle
middle
it should be as even as possible.
Right.
But that's also then when we do like no more than, if we say no more than 2 ways that it can split, there could be spot redistricting from elementary to middle school.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
I don't know what it might look like, but I think the question that we got from the community was that Dr. Marshausen had mentioned in the last board meeting that it was no split more than 3 ways. And there were questions about that since there's only 3 high schools. But I think we would want to keep splits as even as possible, because no one wants their student to go in a small little sliver or cohort.
I agree. I just making sure that, is called out, that it's minimal splits as possible. And we do know that we have a fairly mathematically good set of elementary to middle to high school. So hopefully we can get that. But again, it's not going to be a perfect 50-50. But it will be equitable as needed for that particular split. So the kids aren't, all by themselves going to a new high school and learning all the friend group over again. I think we're in agreement. You're looking serious, Tiffany.
I just start to look that way.
Dr. Marchausen, do you foresee, could it be a split of 3 and then it's just no less than 30%? I guess if we're trying to not be super specific with the future growth and we do the feeder patterns the same way, if we're not trying to create the map, I don't know what that would even look like.
Me neither. I haven't been drawing maps.
Right, but I mean, from the process before, I guess, could it be a 3-way split and we should be doing a 30%, no less than 30%, or we should say no more than 2?
I would think there would be a point that a map maker, if they ran into a problem, would alert us that there was a problem with something in the resolution. I agree with the sentiment that we would like middle schools split no more than twice. Depending on the direction that your criteria lead a map maker, there may be criteria you create that make that challenging. And it's only from being pretty in-depth in a number of maps with this process last August, September, and October. There are some scenarios that, depending on how you set the criteria, could make not splitting at least one of the middle schools 3 ways a challenge. But I think that if you say to a map maker you don't want to split more than 2 ways, that could lead to greater middle school redistricting based on how the numbers all shake down. But that's up to you to say that's what you want. If that's what you as a board feel is important, you put it in the criteria.
Part of this comes from the fall and and prior to the spring, that the community had said that they didn't want any more than 2 splits. So again, we're referring back to what the community has asked for with that.
I think sometimes thinking through like what the community, like they don't have any, I mean, it's pretty much based on no data. There's no data points. It's really just what they feel. So this is a complex situation. I think that we have more data points to be able to pull from. And so I just want to make sure that in this process, we're not restricting ourselves by saying that. And if we're not trying to think about what those implications are, we might not know what those implications are. Maybe a mapmaker does.
Yeah, I agree. That's the challenge of all of this, is like you want to put in what, you know, what the community wants, but you also don't want to over restrict the map maker so that you get a map that's unworkable. So, yeah.
I think it's going to be a delicate balance, because the community did say that if middle school needed to be redistricted, that they were okay with that, to make the feeder patterns work. So my assumption, and maybe this was wrong, was that then the community would prefer only 2 splits. And please feel free to email me and let me know if this is not what you want. But that they would prefer not having more than 2 splits, and if necessary to make that happen, that there would be spot redistricting to the middle schools. But again, that's something that we can discuss, but that doesn't necessarily limit the map maker, because we are allowing them to do those spot redistrictings. Does that make sense? So that we can only do 2 splits.
I also think that if you start putting percentages in there, what may be a 30% breakdown of students in 2027 could be very different in 2035, depending on growth and aging out of communities and those types of things. So I think if you do get to the point as a board where you prefer percentages, is it at the time that the redistricting takes effect? Is it if at any point it gets below that, are there going to be changes? Because we see, and we use the term graying out of communities. There are some communities right now that have a bunch of kids who are between the ages of 8 and 14. And that's just when that neighborhood developed, and that's who lives there. That neighborhood will have a bunch of high school kids at some point. And when the neighborhood kind of matures, and looking back at historical data and working now with map makers, that term graying out is real. We have some neighborhoods that have original homeowners whose kids are out of high school, and Dublin prides itself in being a place, and they use the term cradle to grave. We want people to be able to stay here. And so I would just be careful with percentages.
So would it work to say, keep the feeder patterns, and you guys can all, you know, comment, but would it work to just say, keep the feeder patterns as even as possible, knowing that the community values, and obviously the lawyers would help word this stuff too, so knowing that the community values clear feeder patterns?
If the board's intent is to try to get to no high school being split more than twice, no middle school being split more than twice, I think you can say the board's intent is for no middle school to attend more than 2 high schools. If in the event this is not possible, we need is equal distribution of students between the high schools. I think you could say, and I think the community's intent is, can we keep the largest cohorts of students together for the longest period of time so that friend groups and relationships and all of the things that we've heard that make Dublin special, can we protect those as much as possible? I think you can write that in such a way that the intent is X. If that is not possible, here's what we want to see. And I think the map maker would owe to you as a board an explanation of why it wasn't possible and what they did to meet the intent of the resolution that we provided them in terms of direction.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have proximity then, and traffic and safety is covered under that. Move the least number of students, feeder patterns, what Dr. Marchesson, what you said. And then open to middle school redistricting as well. Is there another one I'm missing? Is that it?
Non-transport zones.
In the non-transport zones.
And really, with the non-transport zones, there are some areas that would fall really close to being able to move to another school, but due to they currently don't get transported, that's why that needs to be in there. Is because there are some non-transport that are relatively close to Scioto, but because they are non-transport to Kaufman, we wouldn't move them. But definitely, I think, we need to look at proximity and somehow try to quantify what that walk, bike thing looks, what that is for the map maker. Because I don't know how to quantify that. Anything else? About redistricting? Or no? Can we move on? Okay. That's what I'm actually asking. Are we able to move on? So there's no action items from Dr. Marshausen, so we are now moving on to Mr. Kern.
Before we move on, can we just, so that everyone is on the same page, just know what the next steps are and what's going to happen and, what we're going to do with this conversation and discussion that we just had?
So the next step will be, and by the way, not all of us as a board can sit down with the attorney to write this because we are not allowed to get together as a board to do so. So there will only be two of us there. It'll be Mrs. De Silva and I with the attorney. And we will be writing the RFP. Now, just because we're the ones writing it doesn't mean that it can't be changed and things can't be added, because there's going to be a first reading and then there's going to be a second reading. So it's not, we're just taking everything that was said tonight and trying to put it into that resolution, and then again, it'll come before the board, and the board will decide if that's accurate, if that's the way they want the criteria to be, and if there's a different ordering that needs to take place of the criteria. And we'll also have then almost, well, what is that? We'll have 10 days in between the first reading and the second reading to also hear from the community, to email. As you know, we are getting lots of emails about this, so we can read through those and gather more information as well. So at that second reading, we can be prepared for if there's things that need to change. If there are things that need to change, we will probably have to do another first reading and second reading, possibly. I'm not sure about that. Policy guru, do you know?
I'll let them speak.
There is nothing governing this process. Your policy says I get to attend, the superintendent assigns students where they go to school. I've asked you to provide the criteria and the priorities for that process because of the community's desire for more transparency, the community's desire for board oversight, and the community's desire for the elected officials to be the one making this decision. So there isn't a statutory requirement for first reading and second reading. In a process that is this public, we thought it best to, before adopting a resolution, giving the public those 10 days to contact us with their thoughts. We know they are incredibly proficient with email, social media, YouTube, and other various ways of communication. So during those 2 days, I am sure we will hear from them. I also, from a public standpoint, want folks to know that because this is a business meeting, unlimited public participation would not be possible. But when folks want to submit written testimony, just like our General Assembly, we would allow written testimony to be submitted in the event that someone wants to share things with the board. The written testimony will be scanned in and included with the board minutes and available for the public to see. So as we look at May 11th and May 21st and the reality that we can't hear from everyone in our community who wants to talk to us, we do have emails, we do read those emails, and there will be the opportunity for written testimony to be submitted at those 2 board meetings.
Really quickly before we move on, that just reminded me for the FAQs, the roles and responsibilities that you kind of described, is that something that we can put on the website that actually is specific about who is doing what in this process? I think that's kind of the questions that I'm getting is, what is the board's role in this process? What is, Dr. Marchesson, what is your role in this process? What is Planning Next role? What is, the third party's role? So can we get some clarity on that to maybe put on the website so that people understand those roles and responsibilities?
I guess we can. I've said it probably in 8 consecutive board meetings on the public record where people can watch. So we could go through and define everybody's role and responsibility. It's just going to be time from us to do that and post it. And if that's what you want us to do, we'll do it. I struggle at this point in the process, the responsibility of the community to educate themselves on a process and how much and how we share that information's getting very challenging when, even when we say things, people don't believe it. There are people who are posting out there that maps have been created. They haven't. There are people who spoke tonight who talked about specific neighborhoods being moved. We've never mentioned that.
Right.
So, Mrs. Seward, I would be happy to outline, like, this process is outlined with the roles and responsibilities. This PowerPoint will be posted on our website, both under the board and under the redistricting portion of the website. If people ask you questions, please send them to this, because this says here, board awards contract, board adopts criteria.
I think what I'm kind of speaking to is, like you said, there is still some confusion on what the board is, if we're then working with a third party to create the maps. So there's still like just some confusion on who's doing what at what juncture, who can do what. That's all. I just think there needs to be some clarity around exactly what the board's role in this process is and what the players are in this process.
I think, maybe if you think it would be helpful, or if community members think it would be helpful to write it out as a narrative versus this, if you think it's, just to write it out so that it's clear, plain English, I think that would be fine.
Right. Just a very clear chart, just who's doing what.
We will work on that tomorrow.
Now, Mr. Kern?
Thank you. Just real quick here, I know we've been here for a little while this evening. Most of this agenda is normal stuff that you've seen, except for two things with DEF. Mrs. Messick and Mrs. De Silva, you may remember from our December meeting, we had similar stuff. Just for our newest board members here and people in the audience, we do have approximately $193,000 in principal. I'm sorry, on our 029 fund for DEF, Dublin Education Foundation Trust, that is on our books. In previous board action, it has been assigned, the investment custodian is the Columbus Foundation. And you're allowed to use any interest earned. I can't touch principal, but you can use interest earned to fund some of the grants. So this board action tonight is several things. First, you're accepting the awarded grants through DEF, which, by the way, works with our administrators here in central office as part of that process. You see the transfer, how we account for those grants for the individual buildings that they go to, and the grants in 019 funds. And then you see the appropriation increase. So the main thing is all this done to be able to use first access this money as part of our agreement as being the investment custodian with the Columbus Foundation. You need to have approval to be able to do that. And then we have the other bookkeeping items that need to be done on our end to make sure that we are within statute. So. Other than that, there are some other donations besides DEF on the agenda for this evening, but I think they're relatively self-explanatory. So that's all we have for this evening. Yeah, that's all I have.
It is recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 5B through 5F. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Seward. Please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Ms. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. McLean?
Yes.
And Mrs. Messick?
Yes, motion passes 4-0. Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Okay, I have 4 short items for you tonight. We're going to start with the one that involves our guests. We have 2 guests here tonight, Jim Souter, who, by the way, is the Dublin Chamber of Congress Business Person of the Year for 2026. Congratulations, Jim. But that's not why he's here. That's just a side gig. He is here to talk to us about life sports, and he's accompanied by Dawn Anderson-Butcher, who also works closely with him. So, Jim, thank you for waiting so patiently. I believe Mr. Gill is loaded. Oh, you've loaded it up. Great.
Testing. All right, we're on. Good evening. Thank you for the time. As she mentioned, Jim Sauter, I'm father of 2, one Dublin graduate and one graduating senior. Professionally, the vice president of restaurants for Cameron Mitchell Restaurants, where we have 5 locations here in town. And as a community member, on the Dublin Youth Athletics Board and also on the Advisory Council for Life Sports, and wanted to report to you a little bit about our ongoing collaboration with Dublin schools with life sports. Many of our youth in Dublin, especially those most vulnerable, lack consistent access to sport and opportunities to build social, emotional, and physical skills. Since 2022, nearly 400 Dublin youth have participated in life sports for free, many identified through counselors as those needing additional support. Life sports essentially acts as a fifth quarter for these students, an intentional extension of the school year that integrates sport and social skill development into a 4-week camp. Programming is designed specifically for 4th through 8th grade students, targeting both skill building and belonging through exposure to 8 different sports, Chalk Talk, which is life sports social skills curriculum, and healthy lifestyle lessons. Our randomized study shows meaningful gains in social skills for participating youth. Youth in life sports improved by 10 percentile points, while those without the program declined over the summer. In addition, we've made quite an impact on motor skills. Youth show clear improvement in foundational motor skills like running, throwing, kicking. These gains are linked through long-term physical activity, confidence, coordination, and focus, all of which translate into the classroom. And on a side note, I remember the first year that we had life sports, I believe the students measured in the 38th national percentile that were in this camp. And so that was a little staggering to me, made me take a step back a little bit. Youth who participate in this program are also more likely to stay engaged in sport, critical for the kids in Dublin schools. This progress is shown through our studying these students who went through life sports and continued on through Dublin Youth Athletics, many of which applied through our scholarship program. I can tell you by being on the Dublin Youth Athletics board that we used to get somewhere between 0 to 2 scholarship applications a year. Now it's more along the lines of 10 to 20 for those children in need, and happy to see that progress growing. And so more than anything else, I just want to thank you for your continued support for the program. This has made quite an impact. I think we're going to reach 500 students here soon, and invite you to come visit the camp. We will have 2 different tours this summer, June 12th and 23rd. Those usually start at 9 a.m. right when the students are getting in. I will tell you, if any of you want to have, if that doesn't meet your calendar needs and you want to have an individual tour, I'd be more than happy to make that happen for you. I promise you will leave inspired and proud. Yeah, and so I want to thank you for your commitment. My brother was a board member in the community I grew up in. I know a little bit about what you do, and I appreciate your volunteering for this, and thank you for the time and for your support for these children.
Jim, if you and Don could just hang a minute, because I do want to say there aren't many programs that we run that are supported with such clear, meaningful data that shows the difference that we're making in the lives of young people. And thanks to this partnership, and if anyone knows Jim, I don't know anyone who knows you who doesn't know of your commitment and your passion for life sports. So thank you, because you are such an advocate, and your work, Don probably could tell us how many seats your work creates, how many opportunities for young people. So thank you. And Don, thank you and the life sports team for getting all of the data so that we can continue to have the conversations for our kids who aren't going on family vacations to the same extent that some of our other families are able to go on. And Jim, we've talked about the kids who don't know how to play lacrosse, and they get to do that. You make such an impactful difference, and thank you both, and thanks for keeping this going, because...
I just want to correct you on one thing. I am committed to life sports. It's because I'm committed to kids in need. And life sports is the best product available for those kids, and we wouldn't be able to use that product without your help. So I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Don.
Come see us.
I just want to say thank you as well. Appreciate you, and thank you for
Thank you
staying here
so
during this long board meeting and all the work that you do.
I've learned a lot.
Thank you. I I would also like to thank Tyler Wolf and Chris Andres for overseeing this from the district level. It takes a lot of time and effort, and it works. So that's such a celebration. I would caution you about visiting this summer and getting in a pickup game with kids, because you will lose, as evidenced by my experience.
And potentially get hurt.
And potentially get hurt. So just go visit.
When you go, don't get in the games with the kids when you know.
Okay, the second thing I'd like to bring up is actually about our communications department. Mrs. Dietrich and Tara Allinger and Tanya Ewert recently attended the OSPRA Awards recognition. This is the Ohio School Communications Professionals Organization, and they came home with the gold, so to speak. They won Best of the Best at this conference for printed newsletter and our Dublin City Schools website. They received a mark of distinction for video, twice, podcast, writing, special purposes and publication, marketing materials, twice, and social campaign. They also received a mark of excellence for student video and special purpose publication. It takes an enormous amount of work to communicate with such a diverse and widespread community, and Cassie and Tara and Tanya do this very well. And what is, if I may speak for you, Cassie, one of the hardest things is all this work sometimes is met with criticism about what they still haven't done, or I didn't see that, or I didn't read that. You know what you should think about? Making a video. Cassie's like, we make videos. So just a huge shout out to that team for continuing to tirelessly communicate with the community, with our students, and with our families. So thank you, Mrs. Dietrich and team. The next thing, both of the next two are on the agenda for your viewing tonight. The first is the curriculum and the graded course of study. And as you know from the last board meeting, there was an extensive presentation. I want to thank Christina Hutchinson, who has been here going on probably 13, 14 hours now. She wanted to be here in case there were any questions. We don't think that you do have them, but if so, Mrs. Marple and Mrs. Hutchinson are here in case you have questions about the PE, graded course of study, visual arts education, graded course of study, high school English language arts, graded course of study, middle school athletics, graded course of study, and the academy framework, in addition to the new K-12 science resource proposal and the K-12 mathematics resource proposal. Did I get it all, Mrs. Marple? I did. Any questions tonight? I want to give my teacher wait time. Mrs. Messick, am I ready? Okay. Okay, if you do have questions, as always, please reach out to us going forward, but we do look forward to your approval of this tonight with a second reading. And then finally, for a first read tonight is our handbooks. Mrs. Althouse, myself, and Janet Grunison leaned into Jerome Assistant Principal's Dr. Brian Arnold, prior Assistant Principal Dr. Brian Arnold, Mike Waite, and Donita Hampton to really give a refresh of these handbooks. And I can tell you from personal knowledge that these haven't had that kind of refresh in at least 28 years. What we have done with handbooks is when there was a change to law or policy, we would adjust that portion of the handbook. Sometimes it applied to elementary, sometimes it didn't, sometimes to high school, sometimes it didn't. So what we had was a effective but very confusing jigsaw puzzle. So the three of them took this on as part of their work for their superintendent's license, and when they asked for a project and I answered with that, they turned a little green, but they did it. And then they handed it over to Mrs. Althouse and myself, and huge public shout out to Janet Grunison, who read every single word, every comma, every period in all of these handbooks and made them consistent. So we're really, really proud of them. And please take a look at them. If you find anything that you need us to change or that doesn't sit right as a parent, let me know. These are put on the back to school portal for our parents to sign off that they've read them. And they cover, they're all based in policy, but they cover all of the things that we need our families to know as they enroll in and attend Dublin City Schools. And that is all I have. Any questions?
there are no questions, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 7A through 7C. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. McLean. Please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. McLean,
Yes.
Ms. Seward,
Yes.
and Mrs. Messick.
Yes. Again, Mrs. Marple, please thank your team. Mrs. Hutchison back there, thank you so much for sticking around in case we had questions. Appreciate you very much. And with that, the motion passes 4-0. Department of Operations.
Good evening. We only have one item for your approval tonight, and that is a resolution to approve our Dublin summer camps. This is a collaboration between the district and the city of Dublin. We do it each year. These agreements are really intergovernmental agreements, just following out responsibilities and liabilities. They cover the use of our facilities, use of our buses, and a food agreement as well, because we supply breakfast and lunch. And this year's camps will be at Scottish, Hopewell, and Carr. A little challenging this year because we move them around depending on where we're doing work this year. We're doing work at a lot of the buildings, so these are the ones where the camps are going to be this year. Any questions?
If there are no questions, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the attached resolution, City of Dublin 2026 Summer Camp. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Seward. Please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Seward,
Yes.
Mrs. McLean,
Yes.
and Mrs. Messick.
Yes, motion passes 4-0. Human Resources.
Good evening, members of the board. So I'll start with the certified agenda. So on tonight's certified portion, you'll see 2 administrative resignations. Ms. Martha Barley is resigning from her current role. She's going to continue to work with us, though, in a teaching role. And then Ms. Sullivan has a wonderful opportunity closer to home. She'll be leaving Dublin City Schools at the end of this contract year. We wish her the best. And then we have 2 administrative recommendations on the agenda. The first is Dr. Brian Arnold. He's being recommended as the principal at Jerome High School, where he currently serves as an assistant principal. And then also with us, Mr. Wayne Tsai is being recommended as the principal at Kaufman High School, where he also serves as the assistant principal. And congratulations to both of you. Thank you for being here tonight. They did an incredible job through the interview process, and we wish them all the success as they move into those roles. You'll see 3 certified resignations and 1 retirement on tonight's agenda. Jay Baker is retiring from Grizel Middle School with 24 years in our district. We're in the middle of hiring right now. We have 13 new hires on tonight's agenda for you. And then you'll see several references to upcoming summer work that we're planning for. And then the supplementals that are on tonight's agenda, they're mainly for athletics that will take place next school year. In the classified section, there are 2 retirements and then 7 resignations. Valerie Bomar retiring from Hopewell Elementary. She has 22 years in our district. And then Lisa Longenbaker is retiring from central office, and she's been with us for 20 years. We wish her the best. You'll see 3 new hires, and most of the rest of the part of the classified agenda is for special education summer schoolwork. The final item is a motion to ratify the public notice made on April 24th, 2026 in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code for the public retire-rehire of 6 of our certified staff members along with 2 administrators. This motion makes the public aware that the public meeting to consider rehiring these 8 staff members will occur on June 8th, 2026. And that concludes the HR portion of tonight's agenda.
Thank you. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 11A through 11C. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Seward. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Please call the roll.
Ms. Seward,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. McLean,
Yes.
and Mrs. Messick.
Yes, motion passes 4-0. Congratulations to our 2 new principals. At this time, we can adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Seward. Please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Seward,
Yes.
Mrs. McLean,
Yes.
and Mrs.